Chapter 38. Dusk was rolling in over the ridge when Abelard raised his head and gave a long whinny. Horace and Malcolm looked at the small horse in surprise. Ranger horses didn't normally make unnecessary noise. They were too well trained. Kicker looked up curiously as well, and then lowered his head and went back to his grazing.
"What's wrong with Abelard?"
Malcolm asked. Horace shrugged.
"He must have heard or smelled something."
He had been sitting by the fire, staring into the coals as they alternately glowed and dulled in the inconsistent wind that gusted through the trees. He rose now, his sword ready in his hand, and walked toward the edge of the copse where they were camped. As he did so, he heard an answering whinny from some distance away. Then an indistinct shape appeared over the horizon to the south.
"It's Will," he said, "and he's got a prisoner."
The outline of horse and rider had been blurred by the fact that Will was riding with the Genevesian, tied hand and foot, stomach down across the saddle-bow in front of him. He trotted Tug down the slope toward the copse, raising his hand in greeting as he saw Horace step clear of the trees. In front of him, the Genevesian grunted uncomfortably with each of Tug's jolting strides. Malcolm left the campfire to join Horace in the open, and he rubbed his hands in anticipation as he saw that the young warrior was right. Will had a prisoner, and the purple cloak was clear evidence that it was their man. Will reined in beside them. He looked worn out, Horace realized, although that was no surprise, considering what the young ranger had been through in the past few days. "How's Halt?" Will asked. Horace made a reassuring gesture.
"He's okay. It was touch and go for a while there, but Malcolm has put him into a deep, deep sleep to slow the poison down."
He thought it was better to put it that way than to say Malcolm had nearly killed him to slow the poison down.
"He'll be fine now that you're back."
Will's face was drawn with weariness and his eyes were bloodshot, but now that his worry about Halt had been answered, there was an unmistakable air of satisfaction about him.
"Yes, I'm back," he said, "and look who I ran into."
Horace grinned at him.
"I hope you ran into him hard."
"As hard as I could." Horace stepped forward to lift the Genevesian to the ground, but Will waved him back. "Stand clear," he said. He gripped the collar of the prisoner's cloak and heaved him up and away, nudging Tug to step to the opposite direction as he did so. The assassin slid down from the horse's back like a sack of potatoes. He hit the ground awkwardly, tried to keep his feet, and failed, thumping into a heap on the ground.
"Careful," said Malcolm. "We need him, remember?"
Will snorted derisively at the Genevesian, squirming weakly, trying to regain his feet.
"He's fine," he said. "It'd take more than that to kill him, and we only need him talking, not standing."
At Malcolm's signal, Horace stepped forward and heaved the Genevesian to his feet. The prisoner snarled at him in his own tongue, and Horace regarded him from a very close range. Something in the warrior's eyes seemed to register with the assassin, and he stopped his stream of abuse.
"What's your name?"
Malcolm asked him, using the common language. The Genevesian switched his glare to the healer and shrugged contemptuously, saying nothing. It was an insulting action, and it was also a mistake. Horace's open hand slapped hard across the side of the head, jerking it to one side and setting his ears ringing.
"Make no mistake, you vulture," Horace said. "We don't like you. We have no interest in making sure you're comfortable. In fact, the more uncomfortable you are, the better I'm going to like it."
"Your name?" Malcolm repeated. Horace sensed the man's shoulders beginning to rise again in the same dismissive shrug. His right hand went up and back, this time bunched into a fist.
"Horace!"
Malcolm called out. He needed the man conscious to answer his questions. Horace kept his fist raised. The Genevesian's eyes were riveted on it. He'd felt the casual power behind the young man's slap. A punch would be a lot worse, he knew.
"He can still talk with a broken nose," Horace said.
But now the Genevesian seemed to decide there was no point in taking more punishment for the sake of concealing his name.
"Sono Beccari."
Again he shrugged. It seemed to be his favorite action with the man, and he could imbue it with enormous contempt, Horace noted. It was as if he were saying, "So my name is Beccari.
So what? I'll only tell you because I choose to. The arrogant attitude antagonized Horace even further. He lowered his fist, and when he saw Bakari smile to himself, he suddenly kicked the man's legs from underneath him, sending him sprawling heavily on the ground again, the fall driving the wind out of him. Horace placed the flat of his foot on the man's chest and pinned him down. "Speak the common tongue," he ordered. Horace glanced at Will, who had dismounted and was leaning wearily against Tug's side, watching with a suspicion of a smile on his face. Like Horace, he felt not 1 ounce of compassion toward the Genevesian, and he knew it would be important for the man to understand that they would not spare him any pain in finding out the information they were seeking. "If he doesn't behave, kick him in the ribs," Will said. Horace nodded. "With pleasure." He leaned down again to the man who had regained his breath. "Now, let's try it again. In the common tongue. Your name." There was a moment's hesitation as the man, glaring in fury, met Horace's eyes. Then he muttered, "And my name is Bakari." Horace straightened up and glanced at Malcolm. "All right. He's all yours." The healer nodded and gestured toward the campfire and the unconscious form beside it. "Bring him over here, will you, Horace?" he asked. He walked to the campfire and sat down cross-legged. Horace simply reached down, grabbed Bakari by the scruff of his neck, and dragged him across the ground to a spot facing Malcolm. He jerked him upright into a sitting position and stood over him, his arms folded. Bakari was very aware of his threatening presence. "Just give us a little room, please," Malcolm said in a mild tone. Horace stepped back a few paces, although he remained alert, watching the Genevesian keenly. "Now, Bakari," Malcolm's tone was calm and conversational, "you shot our friend here with one of your bolts." He indicated Halt, lying a few meters away, his chest barely moving as he breathed. Bakari seemed to register the ranger's presence for the first time, and his eyes widened. After all, he had seen them bury their companion. Or so he had thought as much. "Still alive?" he said, surprised. "He should have been dead 2 days ago." "Sorry to disappoint you," Horace said sardonically. Malcolm gave him a warning glance and then continued, "You used a poison on the tip of your bolt." Bakari shrugged again. "Maybe I did," he said carelessly. Malcolm shook his head. "Certainly you did. You poisoned the tip of your crossbow with Araconia." That definitely took Bakari by surprise. His eyes widened, and before he could stop himself, he replied, "How can you know that?" He realized it was too late to recover, that he had totally given away a vital piece of information. Malcolm smiled at him, but the smile went no further than his lips. "I know many things," he said. Bakari recovered from his initial surprise and pushed out his bottom lip in an insolent, careless expression. "Then you know the antidote," he said, his former dismissive manner having returned. "Why not to give it to him?" Malcolm leaned forward to make full eye contact. "I know there are 2 antidotes," he said. Again Bakari gave an involuntary start of surprise as he spoke, and although he recovered quickly, Malcolm had noticed the reaction. "And I know the wrong one will kill him." "Che sera," Bakari replied. "What did he say?" Horace demanded instantly, taking a step forward, but Malcolm gestured him back again. "He said, 'What will be, will be.' He's obviously a philosopher." Then he turned his gaze back to the Genevesian. "Speak the common tongue. Last warning, or my big friend will slice your ears off and cram them down your murdering throat." It was a mild, conversational tone in which the brutal words were delivered that made the threat more frightening. That, and the unblinking stare that Malcolm now fixed on the assassin. He saw that the message had gone home. Bakari's eyes dropped from his. "All right, I speak," he said softly. Malcolm nodded several times. "Good. So long as we understand each other." He noted that the man's quiver still hung by his belt. Will had secured his hands behind his back with thumb cuffs, so that the quiver and its contents were well beyond his reach.
He had seen no reason to waste more time unbuckling it and discarding it. Malcolm leaned across to Bakari, reaching out for the quiver. Initially, Bakari tried to withdraw, thinking another blow might be coming. Then he relaxed as Malcolm carefully withdrew one of the bolts and inspected the point. Malcolm's brows knotted in a frown as he saw the discolored gummy substance coating the first few centimeters of the steel tip. "Yes," he said softly, the disgust obvious in his voice. "This is poisoned, all right. Now all we need to know is, which variety did you use? The blue flower or the white?" Bakari broke Malcolm's gaze. He glanced at the still figure a few meters away and then allowed his eyes to roam, taking in the threatening form of Horace and the exhausted young ranger standing back some distance, watching in silence. He sensed the expectancy in the two young men, read the tension in the air as they waited his answer. In spite of their threats, he instinctively knew that these three would not kill him in cold blood. They might beat him, and he could stand that. In the heat of battle, he knew either of the young men would kill him without hesitation. But here, with his hands tied behind his back and his feet hobbled? Never. If the situation were reversed, he would kill them without a second's thought. He possessed the cold-blooded cruelty necessary to perform such an act, and because he had it himself, he could see that it was missing in them. Sure of himself now, he looked back to Malcolm and allowed the inner smile to break through to the surface. "I forget," he said.